He was raised among the dead, an undertaker's grandson, trained not in glory, but in silence. Yunsel grew up with nothing but his grandfather's guidance, learning how to read the bodies of the fallen, every scar, every wound, every hidden truth carved into flesh. But one night, everything was stolen. His grandfather, once a feared master of the demonic blade, was hunted down, his arms severed, his eyes gouged out, his life bled away before Yunsel's very eyes. His final words, "Do not seek revenge." But how could Yunsel obey when the only family he had was butchered in front of him? With nothing left but rage, Yunsel steps into the demon palace, where prodigies are forged into the 10 demon masters. To others, it's an opportunity for power. For him, it's the first step toward vengeance. Looked down on as weak, Yunsel reveals his true gift, not raw strength, but terrifying observation. He dissects every battle, every enemy technique, and when others fall, he survives. From Hell Island's deadly trials to mastering the beast-like senses of forbidden martial arts, Yunsel carves a path no one expected. A path built not on fate, but on blood, loss, and cold determination. This is not the rise of a chosen hero. This is the story of a boy who defied death itself to hunt the demons who destroyed his world. The story opens in the fearsome Alliance, a place also called the Demon Palace. Crowds of people are shown standing in a long line, eagerly waiting for an unknown event. A man appeared surprised, realizing the amount was much greater than he had anticipated. A different man explained that naturally, the group claimed they would accept anyone, no matter their background or allegiance, offering to train them in forbidden martial arts if they showed promise, and remarked that it would be a shame to let such a chance slip away. The man remarked that, had he been younger, he would have submitted an application. As he finished speaking, the elderly gentleman's attention was suddenly drawn to something nearby. Someone wondered aloud whether a person had passed away. His coworker pointed out that the 10 Demon Palace competition had not begun, suggesting that he was making assumptions too soon. The elderly man wonders aloud about the presence of someone so young working as an undertaker. The young boy gazes upwards, his eyes fixed on the sky above. He declared that this was only the start, expressing his hope that his grandfather was observing his actions. They discover that his name is a name his grandfather bestowed upon him. After rescuing from a snowy field, his grandfather, who worked as an undertaker, taught him the trade as well. A young carefully examined the cadaver, noting that the man had once mastered an exceptionally fast style of swordsmanship. His grandfather wanted to know why that thought had come to his mind. The boy responded by pointing out his thin frame, noting that the muscles on his left leg, particularly at the front of his calf, were surprisingly strong and well-shaped. He also reflected on how working as an undertaker was a profession that often caused others to dislike them. His grandfather's pride in him meant everything, making any other opinion unimportant. His grandfather believed that his grandson possessed a divine talent for undertaking, as if the heavens themselves had blessed him with this gift. Regardless of the challenges he faced, his grandfather remained by his side through it all. Things had been fine, but that changed unexpectedly. One morning, while he was still asleep, his grandfather quietly got out of bed. He gazes through the window at the bamboo forest beyond. A powerful wind swept through the forest, causing him to feel an unusual presence. She appeared to recognize the object, recalling the saying that gentle souls never come searching for you, while those who actively pursue you will never succeed in finding you. He gently urges to awaken, assuring her of his goodwill. He challenged the other to a contest, eager to see who could pretend to be lifeless more convincingly. Determined to succeed, he knew that if he performed well, he would finally receive the clothes and sword he had been longing for. His excitement was clear, as he eagerly wondered whether the other person truly meant what he had just said. He was placed gently inside a coffin. His grandfather advised him to persevere and hold on until morning arrived. Wonders aloud about the reason for such a lengthy duration. His grandfather simply shuts the lid of the coffin. He reached out and took hold of his sword. He steps out into the open air, where the sound of a man's voice drifts toward him. He had secluded himself, almost as if he were trying to disappear from the world. The rat was questioned about his opinion, leading to the revelation that his grandfather had once been involved. Was known as a martial artist who wielded the demonic blade from the title VII branch. Yang admits that it has been a long time since he last heard that name, and the person standing before him is. He explained that he had stepped down from the vice palace master position simply. He struggled to make a living through subpar work, and then suddenly lunged forward, launching an attack from above. Both sides launched their assaults, and the force of their blows crashed together in a powerful clash. Explained that he accepted the job, not out of necessity to survive, but as a way to atone for the choices he had made throughout his life. He effortlessly defended himself against the strike. He offers his life in exchange, but insists they move to a different location, unwilling to risk harm to innocent bystanders. The attacker bursts into laughter at the sight. He reluctantly agreed, warning that running away was not an option he should even consider. It becomes clear that he never had that intention in the first place. Inside the casket, the box trembled violently until at last burst out from within. He admits that he couldn't wait any longer, expressing his strong desire for both the uniform and the sword, though he finds the temperature far too chilly. He begins to question the whereabouts of his grandfather. He usually waited for him during games like this, and wondered whether the enforcers had summoned him. He believes that, in their eyes, entertainers are not even considered human beings. As he steps outside, an unexpected sight catches him off guard. He felt a surge of surprise as his eyes took in the many scars left by the assault his grandfather had managed to fend off. He notices the distant echoes of a battle unfolding somewhere far away. He wishes it isn't real and chases after the possibility. Sam froze in place, his face pale with terror. He gazes at his grandfather, noticing the look in the old man's eyes. Noticed that the person's eyes were missing and their arms had been severed. He rushed to the scene, and his grandfather questioned if the injured individual was actually. Confirmed that it was indeed the case and wanted to know what had happened. He then offered an apology. And explained that he needed to leave. If the man were to lose his life, he would no longer be able to carry on as the undertaker. Interrupts him, urging him to be quiet. Instructed him to pay careful attention, warning that seeking revenge must never cross his mind. Despite his growing frustration, clenched his teeth tightly, unable to hide his irritation. He shouted that they were responsible for turning him into who he was, and declared he would never forgive them. He states that, unless he is granted the chance for revenge, he decided he would prefer to leave with him instead of staying behind alone. Yang admitted that he once believed he could move on. He wished for a peaceful passing, believing this was the final thing he needed. He is being sent on a quest, with instructions to travel a great distance from home. He remembered how much happiness he felt during the time they spent together. He exhales for the final time, and the figure begins to lean forward, losing their balance. The character collapses onto the ground, remaining utterly still. Gazed at his hand, now stained with blood. The lifeless body of his grandfather lay before him. He appeared visibly shaken, as the experience seemed to shatter him from within. Over time, his eyes ran out of tears to shed. He resorts to the skills he excels at. He carries out undertaker duties for his grandfather. He explains that advising him against seeking revenge was. She tried to shield him, yet he ignored her warnings for once. His arms had clearly been severed at the precise point. At that moment, an unusual assault surged upward from beneath, its rarity making the attack all the more surprising. They shift their approach, now aiming their attack directly at his eyes. The unusual sword technique could only have originated from the demonic path, she realized. It seemed likely that only the yoga technique could inflict injuries of this nature. There were 93 marks on his back, each one a sign of past encounters with concealed weapons, while even the most skilled, known as the sky full of falling flowers, had no more than 66. However, this difference did not diminish his abilities as a formidable player. It did not appear to be the work of another person. Instead, it seemed as if a concealed weapon had fired hundreds of projectiles. All at once, attention shifted to him. The area beneath his tongue was also noticeable. His fingernails appeared marred by discoloration. Being exposed to a deadly poison leads to the flesh decaying and the blood turning foul. A practitioner aligned with the demonic path, having mastered the yoga technique, wielded a top-tier concealed weapon and relied on explosives capable of spreading a foul stench. Rotting tissue and tainted blood. This greatly reduces the number of people he needs to search for. Now that he understood which clues could be discovered, now more resolute than before, he set his mind on uncovering the identity of the person responsible, ready to follow any lead that might bring him closer to the truth. In the present moment, a solitary tear fell onto the paper as he wrote his name. The guards fixed their gaze on him, their expressions filled with curiosity as they wondered aloud what sort of rural sect the clan could possibly be. A guard speculated that the man looked frightened because he had read the documents about surrendering control over his own body. She instructs him that if he refuses to stamp his finger, he should simply leave. Lifts his thumb towards his lips and begins to speak. She bit into it, tearing away the skin, which left both guards startled. He goes on to share that everything changed for him when his grandfather died. He lost everything, and his world fell apart. He realized that vengeance was the only road remaining to him. He believed that entering this competition would be the beginning of putting his plan into action. The narrative reveals a history of prolonged conflict between the orthodox and unorthodox sects vying for dominance within the orthodox sects, united under the leadership of the Alliance, strive to uphold justice, while the unorthodox sects, gathered around the Demon Palace, revere power above all else. For a significant period, these opposing factions managed to sustain a fragile balance. The orthodox sects, eager to move forward, ended up establishing the group of 18 martial masters who became known as the Masters for the Greater Good. Faced with the looming danger posed by the Alliance, the leaders of the Demon Palace sought a strategy to strengthen their own influence. In response, they devised a scheme to establish an elite group known as the 10 Demon Masters. Setting aside any former loyalties, they resolved to choose 10 exceptionally talented individuals. These chosen prodigies would be instructed in the unique martial arts techniques of each of the 10 demonic sects, granting them access to the most powerful teachings available. The authentic martial arts techniques practiced within the Demon Palace. One of the main motivations that drew everyone to the Demon Palace in the first place was this very reason. A crowd of people glanced about, their eyes scanning the surroundings. On the other side of the palace, he remarks that he can feel the presence of a powerful force. Several individuals in the crowd seemed to radiate a distinct aura. Among those present, there was a high chance that one individual had a connection to the person responsible for his grandfather's death. The murderer possessed martial skills far surpassing what he could comprehend, making it impossible for him to truly assess the threat. Driven by a desire for vengeance, he set out on his path. He aspired to reach the status of a martial master like that figure, but at present, without possessing those qualities, he remained unable to do so. Lacking any connections or training in martial arts, he realized that the fastest path to gaining strength was by joining the ranks of the 10 demonic masters. Several of the contestants appeared caught off guard. A man walked in, unexpected, with a group of people following closely behind him. He revealed that he was the chief instructor, known by the name, and that people often called him the Gold Dagger with blood eyes. Onlookers spotted him, and were astonished to see that the headmaster had appeared in person. He explains that this location serves as a testing ground to discover the most talented individuals from every demon sect, and that admission is reserved for those who. Anyone who successfully completed every challenge set by the demons would earn the chance to be chosen as one of the 10 demon candidates. The masters began to discuss the details of the first trial. The skilled fighters from the Demon Palace prepared to evaluate everyone's physical abilities. Several individuals wondered aloud how this event could be considered a trial, believing instead that it resembled a competition. They began to seize the items and examine them closely. Those who succeed end up being set apart from everyone else. The person who had suggested having a competition quickly backed down and admitted they might not want to go through with it after all. Explains that those who succeed in this test are allowed to proceed to the following location. A man approaches him. He lifted his hands and began to examine Spotty closely. He suddenly feels surprised by what he sees. He was described as being utterly terrible, with no redeeming qualities. He was surprised that he had chosen to take part at all. Nevertheless, the act of taking a life, the determination he showed as he let go was unquestionably genuine. He remained unable to allow the other to go by. Considered his words carefully before expressing his thoughts. Up to this point, he had only mastered the care of the dead, leaving him completely unprepared to succeed in a challenge like this. Nevertheless, it seemed impossible for things to end like this. Several individuals in the crowd began to show signs of frustration. Expressing a sense of injustice, the character felt that the situation was simply too unfair. If the selection of the 10 demon masters depends solely on physical skill, the character questioned the purpose of holding a competition, feeling that the entire situation was unjust. Bursts into laughter, then explains that the foundation of martial arts lies in strong muscles and bones. He goes on to mention that the competition was organized to find talented individuals from different areas who possess these essential qualities. Despite struggling to meet even the simplest requirements, they still found reasons to grumble, which seemed almost comical. One of the men insisted that they deserved at least a fair chance. Fixed her gaze on him, her eyes sharp and intense like a sudden flash of lightning. An aura began to glow from his eye, as he reassured the other person that there was no need for concern. He felt anxious, knowing that for the second trial he would choose individuals who, even with weak physical abilities, showed strong potential to master martial arts. The second trial was set to begin right away. From this moment forward, everyone was required to turn against one another and battle fiercely. The only thing that mattered was staying alive until everyone else was gone. The contestants insisted that they shared a common goal, and none of them wished to oppose each other. The boy who had been talking non-stop let out a sigh, resigning himself to act first under the circumstances. Regardless of the outcome, this situation would benefit him. Even if it required him to take a life, he was prepared to do so. He glanced over his shoulder and noticed standing with a woman. They believed that this group would be the simplest to go after. He seizes his spear, determination flashing in his eyes, and rushes directly toward his opponents. He moved in until he was within range, then hurled the object in their direction. The creature let out a shriek about death and suddenly darted directly at. The blade pierced the girl, and he declared that at last, this was the moment he could end her life. The story reveals that her name is the Red Dragon. His name was Y. She collapses onto the floor, her body giving way beneath her. Fixed her gaze ahead, her expression unsettling those around her as the realization spread. She was truly lifeless. She calmly explained that the blow had missed the ribs entirely and pierced straight into her heart. Despite his frail build, moves with quick reflexes and impressive agility, boldly invited anyone else who wished to challenge him to come forward, confidently assuring them that he could handle every opponent. Claims to make quick decisions, yet often shows poor judgment, and just as he thought, the area is crowded with people he considers useless. One of the assistants acknowledged that anyone who appeared dangerous in a fight like this would naturally attract attention and become a target. However, this situation was likely to motivate the others to take action. Slowly retreats as the crowd around her panics, unsure of how to respond to the situation. As impatience spread among the crowd, tensions rose until they began turning on one another, resulting in violence. A man attempts to retreat. He is suddenly wounded as a sharp blade pierces his side. Observes that the younger individuals, unaccustomed to loss, now appear utterly lost and powerless. At this moment, chaos erupted into a full-scale massacre. A sense of total panic had taken hold of some individuals. Some of the characters can be seen participating in one-on-one battles. When confronted with their possible demise, individuals unlikely to survive would find their senses numb and unresponsive. He suddenly notices something that draws his attention. He appears to be quite impressed. An assistant glances in their direction. Upon understanding the subject of the conversation, remarks to herself that apparently not everyone among them lacks sense after all. Stood beside another man, both of them resting their backs against the wall. despite the ongoing loss of lives around her, manages to survive. The speaker dismissed the group as mere fools, claiming they had become consumed by their fear of dying. According to order, survival was the only goal, until just one person remained. The crucial point, then, was not about taking lives, but about making it through alive. He believed that as long as he remained logical and kept his emotions in check, he would be able to stay alive. He was determined to do whatever it took to keep himself alive. At that moment, he begins to examine one of the corpses. Someone in the distance continued to battle, wielding a weapon that could strike from afar. At that moment, they noticed and immediately judged from his appearance that he seemed pitiful, assuming he must have been hiding somewhere nearby. For quite a while, shadows had lingered in the area. Meanwhile, carefully examined the scene to determine what had caused the man's death. He explains that a rapid exchange of sword strikes erupted, followed by a sudden burst of intense action. With a graceful sweep of a thin blade, the assailants targeted, catching him just as he was distracted. He became distracted, and just as the object shot toward him, he managed to dodge at the last moment, barely avoiding it as it smashed into the ground below. He continued to hold the box he had been carrying. He tumbles out, prompting the others to burst into laughter as they tease him, questioning what he is doing. He wondered if the man dealt in temple relics, perhaps carrying boxes meant for such trade. Gazed downward, her eyes fixed on the clothing before her. The scene shifts to a memory of his birthday, when he received a special present. The items consisted of an outfit along with a weapon. He lifts his eyes, his stare icy and unwelcoming. He lowers himself into a crouch, positioning his body near the blade that lies just beneath him. The individual lifted their weapon again, challenging him to see if he was ready to try his luck. He prepares to leave, feeling powerless with his tiny sword. Doubt fills his mind, and he begins to whirl his weapon around. A weapon flashed through the air as an assailant struck from behind, cutting him down. The person standing beside him, also leaning against the wall, was the one being referred to. He explained that gratitude was unnecessary for his rescue, as he considered himself worthless, much like, whose distracting presence only served to make things simpler for him. Kept her gaze fixed on the rows of clothing, her attention caught by a sudden sound nearby. Others often claimed that he had sharp eyes, yet it appeared as though he had never truly used them. He had mastered martial arts, making it possible for him to take a life in an instant if he wished. Fixes her gaze on him, pointed out that Bo was in possession of the extermination sword, and speculated whether Bo also wielded the legendary Black Soul sword. In the past, Bo had been known as the most powerful swordsman to roam the land. The assistant introduces himself as Woon Gong, and explains that he lives deep within a hidden valley. He came across the hidden manual and sword of Black Soul. Since his training relied solely on the instructions from the manual, his technique developed in a unique way. His stances appeared unrefined, and his motions revealed several vulnerabilities, yet at this moment, he remained the only student studying under Black Soul. Despite not possessing great physical power, he remained a formidable contender among the 10 demon masters, and there was a real possibility that victory would be his. Admitted to himself that, deep down, he remained an inexperienced novice who did not deserve to wield the extermination sword. Despite concerns about his health, he found some comfort in knowing that no one around appeared to be more powerful than he was. The assistant shared this sentiment, expressing agreement with his observation. Unless something completely unforeseen happened, continued to gaze at the lifeless bodies scattered before him. While Woon Gong continued to face opponent after opponent, the surroundings gradually quieted as he fought on without pause, observing each adversary as they came. He wiped the blood from his sword and remarked that at that moment, he hadn't anticipated that the person would turn out to be him. Only he and remained alive by the end. He believes that taking the man's life would make him eligible to become a candidate for the 10th. The demon master stood before him, and he signaled for to approach, challenging her to make a move. Mentions that he is referring to him. Although he was the most powerful individual present, his vulnerability had already been exposed. He had studied the physical forms of each individual. The individual whom Woongong had slain lingered in memory, as Saul gradually rose to her feet. Woongong began to walk forward, mentioning that he intended to put his abilities to the test for a moment. He lunges forward, launching the opening assault. The attacker lunged in every direction, forcing to evade as best he could. Despite his efforts, injuries kept accumulating on his body. Meanwhile, Woongong remarked that all he can manage are awkward attempts to avoid the attacks, yet it's remarkable that he's managed to hold out for this long. Rai and the assistants observed that, at first glance, he appeared to be taking a relentless beating. However, upon closer inspection, a different reality began to emerge. He skillfully contorts his body at the last moment of every blow, narrowly dodging deadly injuries. Though blood flows as he advances amid the onslaught, the cuts remain shallow rather than life-threatening. The assistant insists that it's impossible for him to have gained that knowledge merely by inspecting the bodies. Remained fixated on the scene, his gaze unwavering as he considered the possibility of having been left behind. And if that were the case, the sharpness of his perception was truly remarkable. She looked at him and let out a sigh, thinking to herself that his sword skills were truly disappointing, even after. Despite enduring a relentless series of assaults, all he had managed to do was inflict shallow cuts upon his own skin. The assistant observes that, while he's undoubtedly goading his opponent and skillfully dodging blows, actually managing to strike back with a counterattack is a whole other challenge. A solid blow would be hard to deliver with such a weak physique. Woongong had intended to spare his life for a while, but the other's display of arrogance made him change his mind. Because he is so desperate to end his own life, he rushes ahead, declaring his intentions as he moves. Raised his weapon, expressing his willingness to grant that wish. He realized that this was his single opportunity to achieve victory. After carefully inspecting the bodies of those he had slain, he came to a sudden realization. His final blow consistently targeted his adversary's weaknesses. The focus was on the most critical areas of the body, the heart and the head. Whenever he felt a lethal urge, his blade would always target his enemy's torso. Knowing this pattern, avoiding the attack simply meant sidestepping that area. Woongong was taken by surprise as the action unfolded before him, while kept her gaze fixed directly upward. He identified the precise spot to strike and directed his focus toward Woongong's throat. He remembers how once mentioned that even skilled martial artists struggle to strengthen the through training. The master explained that if a child were to hit it with all their might, even an adult would be affected. Immediately recognized the opportunity to fake and launched a direct assault toward the target. Blood started to flow out rapidly. The scene reveals that his attack landed precisely where he intended, striking straight into the other man's throat. The blood belonged to Woongong. After shielding, Woongong lost his balance and collapsed directly onto the ground. Breathing heavily, could feel it coursing through his veins. He glanced around the area, wondering aloud if everything had finally come to an end. The assistant notes that this is a surprising factor they hadn't anticipated. Admits that he had anticipated something impressive, because the technique was known as the sword art of Black Soul. He struck the gong and announced that had successfully completed the second trial. His eyes appeared wild, filled with an uncontrollable madness. He repeatedly heard his grandfather's voice echoing through the house, searching for him and asking about his whereabouts. Filled with excitement, hurried after him, expressing that the boy stands nearby, yet his grandfather insists that he is unable to see him. His face fills with terror. When he turned around, it appeared as though his eyes had been hollowed out. His grandfather remarked that his face was impossible to see. He suddenly woke up, his body covered in cold sweat. He was resting in an unknown place, while everyone else remained awake. The contestants shifted their attention toward him, their gazes fixed, just as a sound reached his ears. He notices the distant roar of the sea, and a sensation washes over him, making it seem as though they are truly there. Inside the ship, he realized that fainting was understandable given the significant amount of blood he had lost. At that moment, his wounds were severe, yet he barely sensed any discomfort. He began to question whether a famous doctor might be responsible for this change. A summons had been issued. Nevertheless, the townspeople continued with their daily lives. Most of the people around him appeared physically fit, and several of their faces struck him as oddly recognizable. He questions inwardly whether these individuals are those who have succeeded in overcoming the first challenge. After exchanging glances, the group broke into shared laughter. He noticed that their eyes, full of disdain, were fixed on him, just as he had anticipated. The assistant informed the group that it was now time for everyone to leave the vehicle. The group reached the next challenge zone, which was known as Hell Island. The boat pulled up to the dock, and the assistant stepped forward. The first person sprang forward, signaling to the others that it was time to jump as well. They began to venture deeper into the island. On the island, he gestured toward a cluster of caves and a steep cliff, explaining that everyone would be spending the night there. They were instructed to put away their old weapons and outfits, then emerge dressed in the new clothes that had been set out for them. They could select any cave they preferred, and swords were available for them to use. Glanced around the area before making her way forward. He walked past a group of people who remarked that, although they had expected it to be humid, the atmosphere indoors felt surprisingly pleasant. A woman and a man found themselves in a disagreement about who deserved the spot, while a second man stepped in to urge them to remain calm, pointing out that there were many other good spots available. Points out that these individuals remain completely unaware of the events that took place during the second trial. After the trial ended, everyone appeared more relaxed and less cautious. Several of those who succeeded in passing the first trial stood out because they were dressed in costly attire. Dressed in fine garments, it seemed likely they belonged to the renowned clans. He realized the second trial served as a test designed to eliminate those considered weak. Bill stood before the assistant, who noticed his hesitation and remarked that Bill still seemed uncertain about his choice. He had been moving slowly for a while, but now was the moment when he needed to be alert and energetic. To dilly-dally, he directly addresses him, using his name. He notes that stood out to him due to the intensity of his gaze. Now, surprised that managed to endure, he is curious about the decision we'll make next. He urges him to make a decision without delay, warning that time is running out. Without hesitation, indicated his choice, deciding on the one nearby. At that moment, something unpleasant began to seep out, a foul mess that left no doubt about its nasty nature. Water pooled around them as the assistant observed the surroundings, noting with disdain that, out of all possible locations, he had selected one that matched his filthy clothing. The assistant was clearly repulsed by the choice. Everyone recognized his remarkable intelligence. The entrance appeared to be nothing more than a cramped, grimy cave, but that was just a deceptive. The interior was spacious enough for someone to use it as a training area, while the small entrance served as protection from unwelcome visitors. After catching a glimpse of what was inside, the majority of people chose to stay away. He carefully examined the entrance, assessing every detail with precision, and then instructed the others on what to do next. Entered the building to get ready, then soon emerged again, revealing herself as the assassin. He announces his intention to clarify the steps they must take moving forward. The island, known for its harsh conditions, contained 10 separate martial arts schools. Within each building, students could master a unique form of the infamous demonic sect's martial arts. They could decide whether to master every skill or concentrate on just one, leaving the choice entirely in their hands. They controlled their daily routines, choosing when to rest, have fun, practice martial arts, or work out by themselves. They seemed able to act without any restrictions, which found incredibly strange. The chaos they caused during the second trial left everything in disarray. There was no chance that the group would be allowed to train without interference. Whispers soon filled the air as everyone began discussing their next move. At first, the group began to hurry away. Noticed that everyone appeared to be moving in the same direction, to the Fire Rain Sword sect. He had heard rumors claiming that this sect was the strongest among all the demonic factions. Although mastering their martial arts could be advantageous, he wasn't completely convinced it would guarantee success. He had never been taught any martial arts at all. He didn't mind picking up a skill that wasn't particularly impressive, and he had a clear idea of his next steps. Entering the woods, he soon came across a small cabin hidden among the trees. He questions internally whether he has actually arrived at the correct location. The place was supposed to be called the Wandering Beast Pavilion. Once, their standing was so diminished that they struggled to remain within the ranks of the 10 demon sects, managing to hold on only thanks to their legacy of having produced several of the era's most powerful martial masters. His father had once mentioned them during a conversation about the. Remembering this, he chose this spot as the location, but suddenly the earth started to tremble beneath his feet. He appeared lost in thought, unaware of a mysterious shape tunneling through the ground in his direction. Suddenly, something bursts from the earth, and the sound of a man's voice fills the air as he questions the reason for his presence. He stood in this place, possibly driven by a desire to join the ranks of the 10 demon masters. This marked the beginning of his wandering journey. The mysterious leader of the Beast Pavilion was known as Saw Wu. Glanced over, feeling a bit surprised by the guy's silliness, yet unable to ignore him. He admits that his purpose for coming is to study their martial arts. Wu examined him from head to toe, a laugh escaping as he suggested that it would be wiser not to hurry toward danger and to simply walk away instead. He decided to walk away, clearly unwilling to instruct someone he considered too delicate for martial arts. Explained that he had learned about a martial art rumored to grant someone the strength to withstand any challenge, while Wu expressed his astonishment at knowledge of such a thing. The knowledge of their martial arts, which are on the verge of disappearing, is familiar to him. Yet, mastering these techniques proves difficult even for the most gifted individuals, because the process requires changing his physical form, and with his current condition, attempting this would be fatal in less than 24 hours. He should leave now that he knows this. Bent forward in a respectful bow, prompting Wu to question his actions with a curious look. Notes that, having consented to become his teacher, he would never miss the chance to honor his new master. Wu considered himself a little insane, yet after letting out a weary sigh, he admitted he would. Despite his reservations, he decided to teach the boy as instructed, determined not to let him become confused, since he was only following orders. Emerging from beneath the earth, he reintroduced himself and insisted that he be addressed as Master Saw from this moment forward. Introduced himself, but Wu immediately rejected the name. He was simply known as Trainee Number 1, and everyone realized they could begin immediately. He gently taps the skin beneath his eyes. Almost at once, his eyesight begins to fade. Their eyes suddenly darken until no color remains. He admits that nothing is visible to him, but Wu reassures him, urging him to stay calm. He had merely blocked his sight for a short time, by relying on the hidden arts of the Wandering Night Pavilion. He couldn't tell whether this was the same pavilion, or if there had simply been a mistranslation. He claims that mastering this move is essential for understanding the Wandering Beast path, insisting that it serves as a fundamental martial skill taught by the Wandering Night Pavilion. The transformation would sharpen every one of his senses and grant him animal-like reflexes. The martial arts they practiced stood apart from all others, transforming uniquely with each individual who mastered them. Mastering the Wandering Beast path posed a significant challenge for him. Still, if he succeeded, he would witness a remarkable transformation. The pale form of Wu appeared and informed him that he would soon experience the heightened instincts of a roaming animal. However, the majority never live long enough to reach that stage. He moved nearer to, and explained that it would take about an hour to adjust to seeing nothing. He was expected to return soon after. After a while, nothing remains for the person. Reflected on his experience, expecting his remaining senses to heighten after losing his sight, but he found that this was not the case. He had promised to return within an hour, yet the wait felt unbearably long. He realizes that he must adapt right away. He began by crawling, then managed to stand and take a few steps, only to stumble and fall repeatedly. Countless martial artists were locked in fierce competition, each striving to earn a place among the 10 demon masters. In such a chaotic atmosphere, an ambush could leave anyone vulnerable, and the consequences of such a surprise attack were impossible to predict. He begins to feel anxious, convinced that someone is watching him. He moved backward and stumbled, losing his balance as his feet tangled beneath him. He collapsed to the ground and claimed that he realized that, without his sight, keeping his balance had become more important than ever. It becomes clear that much more than an hour has passed before Wu finally steps out of the pavilion. He guessed that was probably confused at the moment, but he felt a jolt of surprise when he noticed energetically jumping around. He remarks that it is quite unusual, noting that most trainees tend to wait for their other senses to return after losing one. Darted about energetically, pretending to confront an imaginary opponent as if reacting to something only they could see. Thanks to this advantage, sprints ahead at an impressive speed. He goes so far as to leap over a rock in his path. He completes the vault with flawless precision, prompting Wu to observe that this is likely the method he used to adapt. He had adapted to the pace so rapidly that it now felt completely normal to him. Now the moment had come for him to attempt dodging the blade. As he drew his sword from its scabbard, he lunged ahead with a swift motion. They never witnessed the outcome. The story then jumps ahead 3 days, showing slipping and landing in the mud. He appears with his clothes and skin smeared in soil. Wu drove his hilt forward again, repeating his attack with determined force. The action continued as another strike landed squarely on his chest. He remarks that 3 days have passed, and believes should finally begin to question his own actions. He endured the intense training methods without protest, though exhaustion was clearly visible on his face. Wu wondered aloud why no questions were being directed at him, expressing disbelief that he was being completely ignored. He wondered about the best ways to dodge the attacks and tried to understand the ideas behind them. Explained that someone had once told him the heart of the pavilion's martial arts was about achieving personal enlightenment. He simply believed there must be a purpose guiding his actions. Wu feels a sense of astonishment at how effortlessly he managed to gain the other's agreement. She reluctantly admits to herself that he has a valid point. He signaled that they needed to move on and surged ahead with renewed determination. Begins to experience an unfamiliar feeling. He claims that he is truly able to sense it. He realized that he could now track the sword's trajectory as it soared toward him, understanding that observing its movement was the only action left to take. He was unable to evade it because of this. He chooses to defend himself by raising his sword to intercept the incoming attack. He believed this was his sole option moving ahead, and suddenly, tension crackled in the air. He clenches his jaw tightly and speaks with determination. Wu could hardly believe what was happening. He wondered aloud whether he had truly managed to defend against the silent strike after only 3 days. Was suddenly propelled backward through the air. Wu tossed a drink to him. They encouraged to drink it all at once. He expressed his gratitude before raising the cup to his lips and taking a sip. He realized the liquid wasn't truly water, and a sudden surge of energy coursed through him, giving the sensation that his blood, which had once drained away, was now forcefully exiting his body. He sensed something returning and felt puzzled by its nature. Wu explained to him that it was the greatest spring of all. He had spent his whole life saving this spiritual water, and he doubted it would be. He felt as if he had finally encountered the rare genius he had been searching for his whole life. Their training persisted, and the group pressed on. Steps forward, skillfully intercepting each of his opponent's strikes. The progress he had made was clearly visible, showing remarkable improvement. Wu's lips curve into a gentle smile. He urged him to withstand the force of this attack at least once. He raised his arm to strike again, but moved quickly out of the way. Wu quickly moved behind him, dismissing his efforts as insufficient. Pivoted while the other person remained still. He couldn't tell whether he had defended against the strike with his own sword, or if his master had intervened with the hilt of his weapon. Wondered aloud whether he had ceased his assault. Wu let out a laugh as he realized that what he had been searching for had been right in front of him all along. Began to witness her predictions unfolding before her eyes. He regained his sight and announced that his vision had returned. Wu advised him to let go of what had happened and move on. He could aim to join the ranks of the 10 demon masters and train under him as an official disciple in the pavilion. If he chooses this path, his mentor promises to help him rise to become one of the demonic faction's 10 most powerful martial masters within a decade. Reflects on his observations up to this point. He genuinely believes he is telling the truth about that, yet there is still some uncertainty lingering in his mind. It became obvious to him that the person who killed his grandfather was extremely talented, and simply mastering these martial arts would not be enough to bring him any peace. He gathered his determination. He announced his intention to pursue the path of becoming a demon master. Wu's eyes widened in surprise, but he quickly composed himself and insisted that it was best to let the matter go. The idea of mastering all 10 demonic sect martial arts was out of reach, even for a prodigy like the grand heavenly demon Ember, who possessed the rare skill to invent his own techniques. Each form of martial arts matches specific body types and energy flows. Regardless of someone's natural talent, they are able to master only 2 or 3 martial arts at most. Focusing entirely on perfecting one technique is considered the quickest path to power within the demonic sect. Apologized, yet remained firm in his decision. Wu considered whether it might be possible to persuade him to think differently. Next, they considered the size. He reassured him that everything was all right, and explained that he would now instruct him in a new form of martial arts. Admits that his understanding is still limited to the fundamentals. Wu explains that the martial arts practiced in his pavilion go beyond mere techniques or lessons. In truth, while he moves at an incredible speed, reacts on impulse alone, successfully deflecting the attack. Wu explains that he has already started working on the fundamental skills. Indicated his understanding just as every sword came crashing down. The attacks directed at him originated from the wild beast path. Expressed her gratitude, but Wu dismissed it, insisting that thanks were unnecessary. He reminded her that he had only been following the Demon Palace's commands. Recalled how he had once received an elixir from him, a gesture of kindness that knew he would always remember. Wu dismissed the matter, urging him to let it go. Wonders aloud about the reason. Wu explained to him that the pavilion operated on a simple principle. Whether it was kindness or resentment, letting go of both was always the wisest path. There is no content to rewrite, as the only provided sentence is choice, and the JSON data is empty. He responds that, if that is true, he will take his leave. He walks into the woods, while Wu wonders aloud about the origins of such a mysterious and powerful figure. It was foretold that a violent storm of blood would soon engulf Hell Island. Reflects on whether his heightened perception stems from mastering the wild beast path, noting that his senses now pick up far more than before. He finds that, even in moments of stillness, the constant flood of awareness leaves him feeling drained. He wouldn't find any real rest in his current state, and mastering control over it was something he had to do. From that moment forward, he would do his best to dull his senses as much as he could. Preventing the droplet from hovering seemed almost impossible, yet as he concentrated on it, his senses appeared to grow less sharp. He believes this will suffice. He unfolded a map and thought about his next destination. He needed to decide on his next destination. The Demon Palace wasn't likely to confine people to Hell Island for endless training, and there was a chance that time was already slipping away. Given the situation, he realized there were no other options left to him. He expresses his desire to visit the demonic sect that was established 700 years prior as a challenge to the powerful heavenly demon emperor. The legendary Sword Emperor, known for his mastery over flames. The most powerful of the 10 demonic sects was his sole remaining choice. He walked directly to the spot and paused in front of the door, reflecting that, when compared to the Beast Pavilion, this place felt different. The place resembles a grand palace. He taps gently on the door. The door opened, and the assistant appeared, wanting to know the identity of the visitor. The character's gaze landed on. Explained that his purpose for arriving was to study the martial arts taught by the Fire Rain Sword sect. The assistant gestures for everyone to come along, explaining that they should follow his lead. Among all the demonic martial arts, the sword techniques practiced in this place stood out as the most extensive. This challenge required the most effort and took longer than any before. The others, who had started days earlier, had already finished the basic test and advanced to the next level. They wondered aloud about why he had arrived so late, questioning if there was a specific reason for his delayed appearance after more than 2 weeks. Explained that his recent studies took place at the Beast Pavilion, but the assistant doubted that he could have mastered the wild beast path in such a short period. Insisted that he had completed the task. The assistant acknowledged remarkable intelligence, but doubted that he could have accomplished so much in just 2 weeks. It was most probable that Wu, feeling irritated, brushed him off without much thought, though there was no. He stepped forward and introduced himself as claiming responsibility for overseeing the beginner trial. He then inquired if anyone needed assistance. He wondered whether pursuing the fire rain sword technique was truly his goal, since perhaps choosing a different challenge would suit him better. Acknowledged the other person's concern, expressing gratitude, but explained that his goal was to master the sword techniques taught by the fire rain sword sect. Responds by indicating that, if that is indeed the situation. He brought his foot down hard on the ground, unleashing a powerful shockwave that rippled outward. A scroll suddenly dropped from the ceiling, and he explained that this was the basic introduction and the practical technique. He needed to learn the 13 forms and dedicate himself to practicing them. Looked at the object with a puzzled expression, wondering to himself how he was expected to accomplish the task. Suspects that he might be admitting his inability to understand a sword manual. Admits that he genuinely has no idea. He never had any training in swordsmanship before arriving at this place, which left in disbelief and questioning whether he was being truthful. Wondered aloud whether had really never studied swordsmanship at any point in his life, and confirmed that this was indeed the case. Agreed that it was logical, noting that the records showed he had never used a particular sword technique. Yet, despite this fact, found it troubling that he was unable to accomplish even that much. Even the simplest concepts seemed puzzling. In contrast, taking into account his sharp eye for detail and the way he handled himself during the second trial, along with the clever judgment he showed when selecting the cave dorm. The idea came to mind that, since he was like a blank canvas, the right guidance could help him achieve results no one had seen before. Admits that, although he is unable to see sword steps, he is certainly able to read and write. He begins to read aloud from the text, which describes a sensation of complete relaxation spreading gently throughout the body. Their movements needed to merge seamlessly, requiring a relaxed and flexible approach to swordsmanship. Most importantly, he had to keep his core and waist loose to achieve this fluidity. Wondered aloud if this was the correct way and showed an example, while felt disbelief that he needed to explain such simple things, especially when he was supposed to be choosing one of the 10 demon masters. He instructs the other to adjust his posture, noting that when his body is rigid, his core tightens too. The importance of maintaining self-control becomes clear. Immediately follows the instruction, allowing his thoughts to settle and his mind to become calm, blending gently into a peaceful state. Questioned whether his words had been immediately understood after he finished speaking. He insists that his stance is already good enough, and promises to instruct him in the Fire Rain 13 forms. Without hesitation, they began reviewing the material repeatedly, with present to support his advancement and offering an encouraging thumbs up. Began skillfully connecting the pieces in a continuous flow, showing clear signs that he had finally mastered the foundational techniques. Observed the situation and concluded that it matched his expectations, recognizing the boy's remarkable talent. He instructs to picture an opponent standing before him and to demonstrate all 13 forms. Wonders aloud if the imagined foe could be anyone, to which confirms it can. Then explains that this challenge serves as the test required for advancement to the intermediate chain. The purpose was to observe how his fundamental techniques revealed traces of sword intent. He realized the chance arrived sooner than he had expected. He understood that this was his chance to show everyone what he was capable of. He spreads his feet apart and declares his intentions. He is required to picture an adversary that he has to overcome. He focused intensely while drawing his sword from its sheath. He unleashed the initial move of the 13 techniques, known as Peerless Wind. Appeared startled at its next action. He gets ready for the second one and smoothly moves on to the third. Observed the method known as foggy drifting clouds and wondered if this was truly the fire he had heard about. 13 raindrops began to take shape, emerging from the misty haze. Clouds typically refers to a sword technique marked by its gentle nature and lively energy. The movement ought to resemble the gentle drifting of clouds and the quiet spreading of fog, yet the actual execution differs from this ideal. He notices that the way he uses it feels unusually precise, and he questions whether he is intentionally altering it. Altering the fundamental motions of a sword style that has been handed down through the ages is something only a true can achieve. The modified sword techniques carried a deadly aura, as though he stood before the very foes who had wronged his master or family. Found himself astonished, realizing that the sword techniques of the Fire Rain Sword sect, regarded as the most traditional among sword arts, had been transformed in such an unexpected way. This left him deeply curious about the experiences that had shaped this young person's life. Found the situation unusual, noticing that the energy at his fingertips was now controlling the direction of the sword's movement on its own. He wonders whether the wild beast path is the cause. With each use of the Fire Rain 13 forms, his instincts along the wild beast path became increasingly acute. He aimed to merge both techniques fully, knowing that if he succeeded, the resulting swordsmanship would become something entirely new and no longer resemble the Fire Rain 13 form. He realized he had to move quickly and get back to mastering the fundamental sword techniques. At that moment, he suddenly stops moving. The pretend foe he battled began to shift and alter its form. He transformed himself to resemble the foe responsible for his grandfather's death. His heartbeat suddenly races out of control. He clenches his jaw tightly and lunges ahead. He advanced by employing the 7th move from the 13 forms, known as Overturning 4, and brought his weapon down in a powerful swing. His imagined foe quickly moved out of the way, causing him to strike at empty air. He claims to be quick, yet despite unleashing a relentless series of attacks, none of his strikes managed to connect. He boasts about being the quickest fighter he's ever faced. In response, his opponent begins to remove his clothes. They slid their sword back into its cover, then aimed a sharp, direct strike at its head. Barely avoided the attack, explaining that he was unable to do so. He found no room to evade, so he relied on every bit of skill he still possessed. In one swift motion, he lifts his sword high behind his back. Standing behind him, the figure insists that he must release everything he's holding back. Urged on, he unleashes a relentless stream of attacks, one after another without pause. His master's adversary offered a sly grin and lifted his hand into the air. They lifted their weapon, bringing it up in a swift motion that sliced cleanly through the opposing blade. Both of his arms were severed. All of his connections were cut, rendering him utterly powerless. Lets out a piercing scream, her voice echoing through the air. Beads of sweat dripped onto the floor while he remained utterly absorbed in his spiritual practice. He prepared to battle, but suddenly his grip loosened and his sword slipped from his hand. Admitted that, although he was ultimately defeated, this experience allowed him to succeed in the end. The elementary chamber evaluated his grasp of swordsmanship and his overall comprehension. In an actual battle, the 13 forms were put into action. He flicked his sword upward, sending it spinning through the air before snatching it back into his grasp. He demonstrated beyond doubt that his mastery of the Fire Rain 13 forms was remarkable, and it was clear he was ready to move forward into the intermediate chamber. Thought it was probably quite irritating. It was a challenge for him to instruct a person who was completely unfamiliar with the art of sword fighting. He patiently demonstrated each step too, who expressed her gratitude by bowing respectfully to him. Expressed his determination to put in even more effort as he moved ahead. In addition, it became clear that his sword possessed certain unique qualities. He sensed a powerful urge to kill, and realized he needed to stay calm and not let it disturb his composure. Appeared to be reminding himself of that, and wished to do the same. Before moving on to the intermediate chamber, expressed his understanding of the situation. He really had managed to master the wild beast path in only a few weeks. He had only been training for a few weeks, yet his rapid progress allowed him to advance to the intermediate chamber much sooner than anyone had anticipated. As he steps inside, the scene unfolds just as he had anticipated. He entered the room, uncertain at first if he would be able to reach his goal. Now, however, he knows for sure. By the time everything concluded, the instructor at the intermediate chamber became completely fascinated by Cell. The instructor remarked to others that the analyst possessed such intelligence that even Brother Sick had a scent reminiscent of toast. He remained unaware of his own identity, and with no available positions left, he was dismissed without consideration. His name was Woon Gong.